So the next video I have for you today is going to be the no overclock guide for the burst fire pistol. This is the currently the only other, at the time of recording, this is the only other secondary, although we will, in a few days, be getting the third secondary. This secondary weapon unlocks, well, the assignment mission for it unlocks for the gunner when you get your gunner to level 15. The basic design of the gun is to fire a 3-round burst. It has a magazine size of 24, which means that you get 8 shots per magazine, and it has 24 ammo in the magazine, which means that you have approximately 5 reloads in the gun. It has a rate of fire of 3, which means it fires 3 shots per second, so your burst is that. It has a reload time of 2.2 seconds, and it has built-in 50% armor break per bullet. If you hit all 3 rounds of your bullet, that would give you a 150% armor break in total. Also deals 21 damage per shot. This gun is a higher ammo and higher rate fire option for certain weapons. So if you want something that has a bit more rate of fire, for example, if you are using the autocannon or the hurricane, I would recommend running the burst fire pistol as your option on that. Although it does depend on what modifiers you have. For the duplicated modifiers, there's none. Everything here is unique. There are 2 primary builds I recommend with this gun. We'll cover them both in turn, but let's look at what each modifier does. For your first build, you have a few options. First off, floating barrel is terrible. I would not recommend it. The way this works is that it reduces the spread in between individual shots. It also reduces the gun's overall spread. This is pretty terrible. Unless you're planning on sniping with this, which I would not recommend when you have the heavy revolver at your disposal, I would not recommend running this modifier, like, pretty much at all. This modifier is trash. You have 2 options at your disposal here. Well, I guess there is a shared one here. They're both the same modifier for the bonus 3 in damage. So this takes your gun up to 24 damage per bullet. Or you can get the blow-through rounds. This makes it so that each bullet can penetrate 1 additional enemy. Now, this is the thing that really is impactful here. So I talked about you have 2 damage modifiers that aren't the same. The blow-through rounds are pretty critical in my opinion. The reason for that is, well, you're never going to want to take this modifier unless you are going for the full damage build. The full damage build gives you 27 damage per shot. That means that you are going to deal roughly 90 damage a burst. That is enough to kill a grunt outright, regardless if you hit it in the head or not. Here's my thing. Here's why I don't run that build. Let's say you run the blow-through rounds, which is what I run, with the increased caliber rounds. What this does is it gives you 24 damage per shot. This means that you will deal, let me do the math on this, 72 damage if you hit with all shots of your burst. Now that is not enough to one-shot kill, unless you get a headshot. However, with the penetration rounds, each bullet will apply that penetration. So that means you deal 72 damage to the enemy in front and 72 damage to the enemy in the back. That is not including if you manage to hit a headshot, which you only need 1 headshot to kill on lower hazards, plus the other 2 bullets hitting, and 2 on the higher ones. So this is the primary setup. Now, the other option you have at your disposal in Tier 3, just cover it, is the high-capacity magazine. This gives you 12 extra rounds in your magazine. Essentially, this makes it so that you get an extra 4 shots before you have to reload. So now you'll get 12 shots as opposed to 8 shots before you have to reload. I don't like running this. There is a build for it that we will cover in a minute or so. This is the general build I would recommend. Now, for your Tier 2 modifier, we have a few options at your disposal. You have the recoil dampener. This reduces your recoil about 50%. Basically, it makes it so that the gun goes up with each shot slightly less. Not a fan of this. This is great for long range. We also have the disabled safety. This makes a shorter delay between bursts. Not a fan of this. I actually like the rate of fire on this gun. If it was any faster, I would feel it being closer to a machine gun, and seeing as all three of the starting weapons that the gunner has at their disposal are automatic fire, even though they do have some startup time, I'm not a fan of that. I personally run the reload modifier. Also, I think 2.2 seconds is a little bit long for a reload. So this cuts it down to 1.5 seconds. I prefer the reload modifiers for both of the secondary weapons, between the revolver and the burst gun, for the sheer fact that they are designed to be weapons that you quickly switch into, fire a few rounds off with, reload if necessary, and then switch back to your primer when everything is dead. So that's the main reason I run that modifier. Now, a few interesting options that we do have here at this last, for tier 4. The hollow point rounds give bonus weak point damage. Now, the gun has no bonus weak point damage on its own. However, I fire 3 bullets. So, if I hit 3 bullets in the head, it's gonna die. That being said, this grants 40% bonus damage per shot. So, it's important to understand that you're going to deal 10 damage per bullet on a weak shot hit with just the 1 damage bonus. With the 2 damage bonus, you're going to deal about 12 damage a bullet. And with no damage bonus, you're going to deal about 7 or 8 damage, depending on the round. I think it's 8 damage per bullet. Yeah, I don't look at my gun for that. That's not what I'm using this for. So the choice here is between the extra ammo. This is the only extra ammo modifier you have. Or the armor break. For me, it's a toss-up depending on your overclock. Now, the armor break is fantastic. This puts at 250% per bullet, which means the first bullet is going to automatically destroy any light armor. On heavy armor, the second bullet will have destroyed it. And so the third bullet has no damage reduction whatsoever. This is a fairly good modifier to run. This is primarily what I would recommend, again, depending on your overclocks. The extra 72 ammo is really good. Now, the number is awkward at 72, because it puts it at slightly less than 3 extra reloads. Slightly less. 2 and some change. So this is a toss-up in my opinion. Now, the real difference where you're going to pick between your builds, this is where your builds are going to come into play. You have 2 builds based off of your mini overclock tier. So, we have a larger burst, or we have a stun. Now, unlike other stun modifiers, this is a guaranteed stun if all 3 shots hit. This is the primary build that I run. And that does count on armor break rounds, which means you can armor break and stun a target at the same time if all 3 rounds hit. This is very good. Also, remember that your rounds are going to have penetration on this build, which means you're going to get a guaranteed armor break, 4-second stun, and penetrating piercing damage on somebody behind it. This is very good as a crowd control option. That being said, the longer burst is a decent option. This gives you more of the machine gun build right here. If you want, what you should be running for this build is this. So on this build, this is the machine gun build, so you get 6 shots in a burst. And the magazine size of 36. This means you only get 6 shots before you have to reload. But you can put those rounds out a lot faster. They're going to have a little bit more damage. The big thing here is that each of those rounds, if they hit, are going to be very good. You can run the penetration, but most of the time you're going to miss the few tail ends of the burst. That's why I prefer to have the extra damage over the penetration on this build. I don't run this build that often, but if you are running a lower magazine capacity on, say, your rockets or your autocannon, this build is pretty good. Primarily, though, I'm going to run the stun build with some form between either the hardened rounds or the expanded ammo bags. Just putting my overclock back on. This is the overclock I normally use. The gun is pretty good. It's not anything special, but it's also not terrible. It is a decent option. As of right now, it doesn't dramatically change the style of play for the gunner all that much, besides just giving you a little bit higher rate of fire option if you want something like that. Unfortunately, the next secondary weapon that he will be getting when the next season comes out is a very slow, it is a slower weapon, one shot, slow rate of fire. We'll see what the modifiers and the overclocks look like for it, but for right now, this is the only real high ammo secondary choice.